Hi everybody, Sam Lanzafame here. How you doing? Today what we're going to do is we're going to learn how to make Nanu's famous Italian red sauce. So in a few minutes I will show you all the ingredients and then I'll explain how to do all this stuff. Alright? Okay. So some of the things that we're going to need to help do this sauce, obviously if you had some real tomatoes, that would be the ideal thing, but most of us don't have that opportunity. So what we need is some regular sauce. It doesn't matter what kind you pick. Contadina is pretty good, but any sauce will do, whatever your favorite brand is. You definitely need some paste. Sometimes I get 3 little cans of tomato paste, sometimes garlic flavored or other types of flavoring or just basic. You also need a can of puree. And then you'll also need a can of diced tomatoes. So these 3 big cans, and if you have a pot of this size, I don't know exactly the actual size, but you can see it's a pretty good size. Pretty, I would say, basic saucepan. I like to use 2 different meats when I do my sauce. I like to use ground beef, about 1 pound. And I also like to use stew beef. And I don't know exactly how much this is here. This looks like about 1 1/3 pounds. I also use some salt, a little bit of salt, some olive oil. I like to use some garlic powder. I like to use some black pepper. Occasionally I'll season with some pink salt, pink Himalayan salt, a little bit of onion powder. I like to use a little bit of ginger, a little bit of Marianne, sorry, a little Gilligan's Island joke there. Some cayenne pepper, yes, I like to add some heat. I like to use some crushed red peppers. Of course, there's no Italian dish without oregano. And also some basil, right? Now, I happen to have some fresh basil as well, and also some fresh parsley. So I'm gonna add that to the mix. Garlic clove, I don't need this whole thing, just probably one little piece of the garlic, and then maybe about 1/2 an onion, right, which I'll cut up and then we'll kind of brown and saute kind of thing. And the secret ingredient that a lot of people don't know about, and this is what really separates this sauce from all the other sauces, is that we use 1 stalk of celery. And that is the secret Nanu ingredient. Alright, so what we're going to do is we're going to get the stove ready and we're going to start working on this stuff. So I'm going to basically use about 1/2 an onion, and I'm going to cut that all up, and I'm going to use 3 garlic cloves. Before I actually cook them up, I'm going to actually brown some ground beef, and then I will also be browning some stew beef. And a lot of times the way the stew beef comes, it comes in big chunks, so sometimes I actually cut those pieces in a little bit, maybe half the size is what they come in, but you don't have to do that. You could also make meatballs, but I'm going to do this without meatballs. So basically the ground beef and also the stew beef. So I've cut up the onions, I've cut up the garlic, and what I would recommend is starting with the ground beef, turning on your oven knobs, about medium heat to start off with, and then you want to brown the ground beef. And while the ground beef is browning, you may want to start chopping up the stew beef. As you can see here, the stew beef is about this size, which is not bad, but if you want to get, let's say everyone gets a bite of meat when they're having their sauce, you might want to cut these up into little pieces like I said before, but that's actually not a bad size. But sometimes they're really large and you might want to cut them up a little bit. Okay, so I've cut up the stew beef into smaller pieces, and now we're going to put in the ground beef. You can hear it sizzling here. So the goal is to just brown this ground beef, and then I'll do the same thing with the stew beef. And this is a little too high, so let's maybe move it down to about 4 or so. Some people might want to do the stew beef in a different pan. Some people even do it in the same pan. Totally up to you. So it started to brown up a little bit. Still got a little ways to go. If you want, you can speed up the process by putting the lid on. That'll help brown a little bit quicker. And another thing that I like to do once the sauce gets going is to add a little scoop of butter. A lot of people don't do that, but I like to add just a little bit, just about a spoonful, right, once the sauce gets going. Now I make my sauce a little bit on the hot side, as I said before. Nanu didn't put like the ground pepper, or I should say the red pepper flakes or the cayenne pepper like I like to do. So you can season this to your own taste, but that's my little twist on things. So I just add a little bit more heat. You don't really taste it that much in the, a lot of people think, oh my God, it's gonna be really hot, but it's really not. So let's check on our ground beef and see how it's going. You can see it sizzling a little bit. You may want to drain this meat a little bit. Depending on how much meat you put in there, it will create obviously some evaporation, so drain that. Some people like to season at this point, which is not a bad thing to do. Just some basic seasonings. So if you like to do that, go ahead, but you could also wait until after you've drained it. And then after we have browned all this meat, we're just gonna put it on a dish, put it off to the side, and then follow the same procedure with the stew beef. So let's see how this is going. It's been about 5 minutes or so, and it looks pretty brown, so that's good. I've actually added a little bit of onion powder, garlic powder, some salt and pepper already. Now I'm going to just drain this onto this plate, and then I will do the same procedure with the stew beef. Okay, so I have put the stew beef onto the plate, and now I'm going to put in the stew beef. Did I say stew beef before? Ground beef. And now let's brown the ground beef. I meant the stew beef. And I would recommend putting the lid on this and let that thing kind of sit there for a little bit. And then when that's getting close to being browned, I'm going to start doing the onions first, and then I will do the garlic. Okay, it's been about 5 minutes or so. You can see that the meat is starting to brown a little bit. Let's give that a stir. Few more minutes and then we can drain that. Check on the stew beef, and as you can see, it's really browning up. So I think this is a good time to move it to the plate, and then I'm going to rinse out the pan and start doing the onions and the garlic. Okay, so you can see the meat has now browned. I got it over on another dish. I got the ground beef in a different dish. And now what I want to do is saute the onions and the garlic. So I'm going to add a little bit of olive oil here. I like to use, when making this part of the sauce, like extra virgin olive oil. You can use, you know, just good old regular olive oil, but I prefer the extra virgin. Just get that around the pan a little bit. Just let that heat up a little bit. Once it heats up, we'll then add the onions. So what I like to do is just to check to see if the oil is ready. So I just like to take one onion and just kind of pop it in there. And you can hear it starting to sizzle. That means this is the right time to do it. Just added the rest of the onions. You don't want to do the garlic first because the garlic burns very quickly or cooks very quickly. So you want to make sure you brown the onion first. And again, if you want to put a full onion in here, you can. Totally up to you. I usually go a half an onion, and then I usually use the other half of the onion for my tomato onion salad that I usually make. Again, if you want to season some of this at this point, totally up to you. One of the things that I do is I like to season at every step that I take. So every time I put something new in the pot, I do a little seasoning. That's just kind of the way I do it. Up to you if you want to do less or more. So you can see the onions are starting to golden up a little bit, which is great. So now it's time to put in the garlic. It won't take long for the garlic to start to brown. So some people like it burned. You know, it's, again, all sauces are basically, you know, done to taste. So whatever you like, you do. So it's really tough to screw it up unless you burn stuff. I mean, really burn it. As long as you don't burn it, your sauce should be good because you can always, like, season it to whatever way you like. So I typically like to add some oregano, some pink Himalayan salt, some pepper, onion powder, garlic powder during this process. So just, if you're wondering what some of the dark spots are in there, it's some of the seasoning. But you can see the garlic is already starting to get all nice and golden. Let's start to mix it now. At this point, I like to reintroduce the meats that we had. So that's looking pretty good. Cover that up for about a minute or so. Masterpiece in the making here. So at this point, I'm going to start adding the cans of sauce. Doesn't matter what order you put it in. Here's the actual first can, the sauce. And then what I like to do is just like get some water in there, about a half a can of water, rinse it all out. Do the same thing with the diced tomatoes. Again, you could use whole tomatoes if you prefer. but I just happen to be using diced this time around. And then don't forget your puree. And again, for however many cans of sauce you use, make sure you fill each of them maybe halfway with water. Get it nice and clean. Get the water in there. Okay, so as you can see, I pretty much cleaned out the 3 cans I was using. So full can of sauce and then a half a can of water for each. Stir that up. And the one that'll give you the most issues will be the paste, because it's just a little tough to get out. But use a spoon, wooden spoon, or a regular, cutlery spoon. Get all that out and add that to the sauce as well. Start adding your seasonings. I got about this much of salt. I don't know exactly what that is, but just kind of eyeball it. And then put in your onion powder, your garlic powder, put in your basil, your hot peppers, the red pepper flakes, along with the cayenne pepper and the ginger. I'm going to be adding a little basil leaf. I got parsley that I'm going to add. And of course, don't forget the secret ingredient, the celery. So I pretty much take one stalk of celery, break it up into like 3 or 4 pieces. You can see I've got a little basil, I got some fresh parsley, and I've added all my seasonings. I'm just gonna stir this. Right now I have it on 5 again, medium heat. Once the sauce starts to boil, quickly reduce the heat to something like 2 or 3, because you don't want all the seasonings in the sauce to burn, because that's the worst when your sauce burns. Experience that once too many times. Stir it up. We'll cover this baby up. And that's it. Alright, so just kind of keep an eye on it. When you get your first bubble of boil, that's when you want to reduce that heat and stir as often as you can. Okay. I add a little piece of butter, like I said before. Maybe once after the boil, after the first boil, I add a little piece of butter, and that's about it. And just keep stirring. And then it's going to get super hot, so you may want to actually put it on low for a good hour or so, and then just turn it right off. All right. We'll check in on it in a few minutes. Check on our sauce and see how it's doing here. You can see a little bit of boiling starting to happen here. Let's stir it up a little bit. And what's really important is with the bottom of the spoon, make sure you are like at the bottom of the pan, because you want to make sure that there's no burning going on. So you want to kind of almost like you're scraping the bottom of the pan, kind of like you're doing this on the side, but you're doing it on the bottom. And right now I do not feel anything sticking to the bottom, and that's a great sign. Because if it does happen, it's not a big deal, but you want to make sure you kind of lower the heat, so that's stuff that'll start to burn. And it's really like the onions and the garlic, the seasonings that are starting to burn, and it causes the whole sauce to kind of burn. So just constantly stir. That's really half the reason why you stir, to make sure nothing's sticking to the bottom of the pan. And again, I have it on 5. Cover this up a little bit. Once it starts to really bubble up, that's when we'll lower the heat. And you can see we're starting to really boil up. I'm going to add my butter. And of course, different times, taste your sauce and see if you need to add any more seasonings. Maybe some people like a little bit more salty I also took some of the basil leaves and the parsley and, kind of cut them into little tiny pieces so it's kind of going throughout the sauce. So hopefully when you take a bite of the sauce, you get a little bit of all the different flavors. Let's take a taste of this. Really good. And at this point, I'm going to lower the heat a little bit, bring it down to about a 2, and then if it starts to really boil, I'll put it on low. And then at some point, right after that, I'll just turn it right off and just let it kind of cook within its own heat. Okay? So basically, that's all there is to it, and I hope that you found it kind of interesting, and maybe you do it the same way as I do it. I don't know, but this is Nanu sauce with a little twist from Sam. All right, enjoy. Bon appetit.